the girls that are on the team. I know it's the most competitive team in the world, and I know it could have gone either way, of me being on the team, me not being on the team. So, I'm excited for them. I'm going to be rooting them on to win gold. I was a kid that grew up watching the Olympics, so it'll be fun to watch them. Honestly, no disappointment. Like, I think it just gives me something to work for. It's a dream. Hopefully one day I can be there, and I think it's just a little more motivation. You remember that, and hopefully in 4 years, when 4 years comes back around, I can be there. Yeah, they called me and let me know, and before everything came out, which was really respectful of them, and I appreciated that. And maybe the same for every girl that made the team or every girl that didn't make the team. There's a lot of players in an Olympic pool, so.
All right, everybody, those comments were from CaitlinClark, that audio courtesy of the WNBA and the Indiana Fever. So you heard Caitlin not disappointed about being a member of the United States Women's Olympic Basketball team for this summer in Paris, France. But, man, a lot of people are up in arms about this decision, and there's a lot to be said, and we're going to discuss more about Caitlin being left off of this year's Olympic team, but we'll also talk about Caitlin's impact at the University of Iowa and more. Let's welcome him to the program. He is a sports anchor for KGAN-TV and KFXA-TV, the CBS and FOX affiliates in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. CurtisFeder. Curtis, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us on the program. So before we talk about Caitlin, before we get to Caitlin and everything with the Olympic team, Caitlin played, of course, for those of you that may be living under a rock, she played at the University of Iowa, and the university is located at IowaCity. Can you explain to the listeners, Curtis, for those who have never been to IowaCity and the surrounding areas, what do you tell them about them, just in terms of not just the university, but some of the cultural things that make up that area?
Well, for one, it's very renowned as a college town. A lot of college kids really enjoy being there. I've been there a couple times, and, my college that I went to was Ohio University, and kind of the main street for students to go to is Court Street, and I feel like in Iowa City there's like 30 Court Streets on there. Lots to do in the town for young people there. But I think the one thing that people might not know is that it is an incredible sports town. In the entire state of Iowa, there's no professional sports team within a 3-hour radius. So college sports is their following. To everyone who lives there, works that 9 to 5, they live, breathe, and die Hawkeye sports. So the fact that CaitlinClark became the face of it wasn't a surprise, because she was so incredible and everybody was genuinely paying attention, because that is their sports livelihood, and they're very enthusiastic. And I'm sure a lot of people have heard about, the wave that the football players do to the Children's Hospital. Iowa Athletics really does pay attention to all of those children that are suffering with either cancer or some chronic illnesses, and a lot of times they will be, mascots for the game. They'll bring them out and they'll do special stuff for them. So it's really cool, really special. And Iowa as a whole, it is the Midwest, the stereotypical Midwest. It's a little less populated, a little more spread out, but there is still, really cool things to do in and around. There's cool events like Old Threshers down in Burlington, and cool Lake Okoboji in the Northwest. And there's a lot more to do in Des Moines, which is the capital and also CaitlinClark's hometown. So all in all, it's typical Midwest, but it's full of people who truly care about sports and all athletics. And Iowa as a state, I think, is a huge proponent of women's sports, especially women's basketball, appreciating the 6v6 era before things switched to 5v5, and Iowa becoming the first Power 5 school to install women's wrestling at the collegiate level, and also having women's wrestling be a sanctioned high school sport as of 2 years ago. So they're really kind of at the forefront of promoting women's athletics.
Wow, Curtis, thank you so much for not only informing me, but also the listening audience out there just about Iowa City and the surrounding areas, and how not just people in that area love their college sports, but they love their sports as a whole. And again, thank you for giving me a history lesson about the University of Iowa incorporating, being the first to incorporate women's wrestling. That says a lot about the University of Iowa and just Iowa City as a whole. And speaking of the University of Iowa, CaitlinClark, her time at the university was truly phenomenal. groundbreaking and record-setting. I know this is kind of like a loaded question, but if you can, sir, can you explain just her impact at the university, not just short-term, but long-term?
Well, for starters, everybody calls her a cash cow. That's for a reason. There was a report that said that she generated over $82.5 million for Iowa just from increased attendance numbers alone. She sold out Carver Hawkeye Arena every game of the season. She sold out nearly every arena except for a couple of those early Christmas time showcases. Every away game was sold out. You had Travis Scott come. You had Jason Sudeikis come. You had Sue Bird come. You had tons of celebrities come to watch her play, in addition to the fact that they broke the record for most attendance of a women's basketball event, having the game, that crossover at Kinnick Stadium, where they played in the football stadium. Well over 55,000 came and watched. CaitlinClark is box office, and she did that just by being herself and being an incredible player. And it got to the point where during her senior year, she was so nationally coveted that local media couldn't do private interviews. Her schedule was that booked up. You know, she was the talk of the town, the talk of the nation. And on top of that, you know, Iowa's a wrestling state. They have their football team went to the Big Ten championship game. She was the biggest celebrity on campus. And one of the flexes that Iowa would do for football recruits, basketball recruits, other sports recruits would be to come meet CaitlinClark. She was part of their pitch. You know, she was the type of person that truly galvanized the entire university. And also, this is another thing. College game day rarely comes to Iowa, ever. I think they only came once for a football game. I believe it was in 2007, and that was mainly because Ohio State was coming. College game day came to IowaCity twice in 2 years for CaitlinClark. One was for that incredible game against Indiana where she hit the buzzer beater, and the other was the final regular season game against Ohio State. And I'll leave one anecdote that I kind of have of when I first saw Caitlin. It was her junior year against Maryland, and it was a top 10 matchup, and I remember watching her on the bench. It's a packed arena, fire going off, and I just see her face and it's blank. And I just remember looking at her, and she wasn't checked out. She wasn't nonchalant. It was just this different level of relaxed focus that I had ever seen in person. And there's the montage video on the Jumbotron, fans cheering, her other teammates are getting introduced, and she's just locked in. And then, of course, she goes out and balls. And then there was a play where I'm filming this on the baseline. Iowa gives up this offensive rebound. They get an easy bunny scored on them, and you just hear Caitlin go, ah! And she claps the ball her hands super fast, and I kind of flinched. She gets the ball, dribbles down, drops a 28-footer on some poor Maryland girl's face, and that's when I knew, okay, she's different. She is next level. She is what everyone is hyping her up to be and more. And on top of that, she's also a good person as well, especially with local media and then the gradual increase in media that came. She had never said anything bad about anyone or any of her teammates or about herself. She was primarily, and you still see her today, just trying to inspire the next generation, grow the game of women's basketball, and hype up everyone around her in the sport and trying to ride the wave of popularity that she probably knows she started, but she'll never admit to the public.
Wow, that's definitely an amazing, and then what a great story that you mentioned about her going up against Maryland and the whole situation with, you know, pregame, and then she's just locked in, I mean, being laser focused, and that's one of the key elements of people, not just in the being an athlete, but just in a day-to-day life, and you can see that the superstardom was already there just by her reaction and how laser focused she was in that moment. And I want to stay just with Caitlin and just with the impact during her time at the University of Iowa. You mentioned about how she's just a good person, and You know, she's always talked about giving back to the next generation, which is what you mentioned. And I want to ask you just, what was her impact, or what is her impact like on Iowa City and the surrounding areas, just in terms from a social standpoint and a community standpoint and economically as well?
Yeah, so CaitlinClark has certainly touched many people's eyes. But the one thing that I'll also say about the Hawkeye faithful is that the biggest thing that they said at their celebration of their season was, don't stop coming to the games, you know. And I think they're still going to come to the games. They're very well set up, and the university is going to be hugely set up because of CaitlinClark due to the expanded recruiting network that they now have with their national exposure. Because previously, it was mainly, you know, just kind of the Midwest, see who are the good players from Iowa, Minnesota, Illinois, see if they can come here. And, you know, if you're the best of the best, you go to UConn. If you know, the fact that CaitlinClark was able to do what she could do without, you know, a perennial blue blood that rakes in 5-stars like UConn, or a program that has a very, you know, monumental head coach that can attract 5-stars like a Dawn Staley, like a Kim Mulkey, although she honestly should have, because if anyone's met LisaBluder, you'd run through a wall for her. But she didn't have that type of pull. And the fact that she was able to do this in Iowa was incredible. And now you're starting to see them get more high-level recruits. There's a 5-star, Addie Deal. She's from California, and she's coming to Iowa. They have a 4-star from Alaska that's coming to Iowa. There's going to be a lot of major recruits that are coming that are going to witness a sold-out Carver Hawkeye Arena and realize that people truly care, and realize that the locker room environment that LisaBluder and now her longtime assistant JanJensen is going to promote are going to be ideal for them. And there's going to be more high-level players coming to Iowa. So a lot of people say that Iowa will never be back to where Caitlin took them. It might not be this year, but give it a couple years, and I think they'll be a perennial contender. And in terms of the fans, they appreciate so many people, including Caitlin, but also, you know, for example, HannahStuelke, her teammate. She's like everyone's little sister. You just want to protect her and watch her do well because she is such a kind soul. And KateMartin, you're seeing, it's almost, we're going to talk about the WNBA later, but KateMartin is almost the most popular rookie. And part of that is because she has that Iowa faithful and people that just love the way she plays. So Caitlin might have shined a light on the fandom support, but I don't think that type of fandom was just never there. Granted, it was never this scale, but that fandom of the sport was always kind of there, and now it's more circulated, and there's more people getting involved, and there's more people traveling to Iowa to watch the games. There's an increase from, like, I think 10 to 15% of people from out of state coming in to watch Caitlin play. I don't know if that will continue without, you know, somebody nailing 30-footers for lunch, but we'll have to see.
Well, that's wonderful to hear, just her impact. And as you mentioned, with those recruits coming in from California and Alaska, then, of course, what you mentioned with HannahStuelke and KateMartin, and we'll get into them in just a little bit. It's just amazing how her impact is still being felt, and definitely for future recruits coming in. As you say, give it a couple of years. I mean, Iowa will definitely be back in the forefront in terms of women's basketball and trying to gain a championship. You mentioned about Caitlin and the local media. When Caitlin became really not just a household name, but a worldwide name, it was difficult to get interviews with her, you being a part of the local media in that area. But I want to ask you, when she did grant interviews or when media obligations were available with the local media, what was her relationship like with the local media?
The one thing that's a little different about college and the pros, me and my sports partner, Owen Sebring, we were kind of joking about this because at the WNBA level, you have, you know, pressers after every practice and before and after every game, and you can basically just talk to them whenever. And colleges, they do a lot more to protect student athletes. So normally you have probably like one designated media availability for players to show up, and obviously you have post-game pressers where players will show up. And Caitlin was always, you know, kind and cordial to everybody. You know, she always was very calm and collected, and you saw that on the full display, especially after the 2023 National Championship game when I was kind of watching that ESPN interview, and they were really giving her a lot of trap questions where they could really find like a conflict soundbite, and she just wouldn't give them any. And that was very incredible to watch, and especially after reading that incredible Wright Thompson article from ESPN, he got the behind-the-curtain look of what Caitlin was up to throughout. And apparently after that interview, she was like shaking with anxiety because she was so worried about messing up and saying the wrong thing. But her biggest goal, like on the mic at least, is to just not be controversial and to grow the game. And I feel like, especially now, it's very infuriating to people who think that she's hiding something, but that's just who she is. I mean, everyone has that competitive fire inside them, but she does it better than I think I ever could. She kind of keeps that in and knows when to be calm on the microphone. But she's always been kind and cordial to everybody, and there's usually, a couple kids that's kind of like waiting outside the press room for her to take pictures and sign autographs and stuff. And so, she kind of mentions it. She always kind of has to be on. She has to be, because it's everyone's 15 seconds of fame, right? Because they're all seeing her for the first and probably only time. And even if she's had the worst day of her life, she has to, make that moment memorable for them. And she does. And she steps up every time. And she's probably not been healthy to play every game, but she has played every game because she knows that people have paid money to watch her play and to see her, and she does whatever she can to produce. And I think she successfully definitely did that at the college level.
Wow, that's amazing. That's a lot of traits that athletes and even human beings can pick up just in terms of knowing when to say it and how to say it and being measured no matter the situation. And like you said, Caitlin's definitely mastered that and has been a pro when it comes to things like that. And, of course, as you said, she's always been having the ability, whether she's having a bad day, been able to make somebody's day better. So that's wonderful to hear about her in terms of just the relationship with the local media as well as the citizens in that area. And we know about Caitlin, her love for basketball and being competitive, and we see the endorsements and things of that nature. But covering her during her time at Iowa, Curtis, what are some things that we didn't know about her?
Well, for one, she's a bit of a jokester. When she's not suiting up against a team, she's, cracking jokes and, just being an all-around teammate. And that's kind of one of the things that her teammates had always said and the coaching staff had always said, is that even though, the media and everybody's shouting Caitlin, she was a team player. She really, enjoyed being with her teammates and joke around with them and do all of that, but also the fact that she also is a very competitive person, and you can kind of see it a little bit. They were like sitting down watching the selection show her junior year when they were in the running for the 1 seed, and I interviewed one of the teammates, and Caitlin was just like, they're disrespecting us by giving us a 2, right? It's a lot like that, I took that personally thing, getting that motivation inside of her. She's always looking to get that killer edge. So it's funny because I know there's a lot of people that may not be aware of women's basketball, so I'm going to be using a few male references just to get them in the mode. There's kind of that trio of GOATs, so to speak, in the modern terms, between Jordan, LeBron, Kobe. She has that Kobe mentality of working harder, expecting greatness and nothing less from her and everyone around her. She has the Jordan aura on the court where she, when you're standing next to a ref, normally the ref has the power, but the ref, in this instance, the ref is with Caitlin, not the other way around. It's so weird seeing that much power with her on the court and seeing how much everyone else fears her and nothing they can do. And then there's also the level of LeBron, where we're getting into it, where there is this expectation to be great, and there is this expectation to be perfect, with social media trying to find every little kink in her armor and her trying to navigate through that. So there's a lot to her, but I think at the very end of the day, as much as people think that she might be, raking in the attention and kind of subtle dissing, yeah, on the court, she's a killer. She talks trash. She gets buckets. But that's all she wants to do. She's an athlete first, and she doesn't want to be a political pawn. She just wants to play basketball and inspire little girls to do the same, or just pursue their own dreams, because that's all she wants to do. She wants to play at a high level and leave the game better than where she found it. And I think some people might not think that she's that simple, but in a way, it's a lot less simple if you think about it, because a lot of people can be distracted with all that, but she's just focused on what her goals are, and that's pretty much that.
That's awesome to hear right there, and especially you mentioned of Caitlin being a jokester. We've seen elements of that out in the media, and even on social media, we've seen a little bit of Caitlin's funny side, particularly being featured on shows such as Saturday Night Live. So that's interesting of some of those factoids and some of those things that you brought up about her. And you mentioned about some of her teammates at the University of Iowa and the relationships that she had with her teammates. I want to start off talking about one teammate who was one of my favorites during her time at the university, GabbieMarshall. You talk about somebody that was such a defensive standout on that team. Just give me your thoughts on Caitlin's relationship with Gabbie.
I mean, it was part of the reason I think that she left is because Gabbie would not be around next year. I mean, her junior year, she had the starting five of herself, GabbieMarshall, MonicaCzinano, McKenna Warnock, and KateMartin. And that starting five had started every game together for 3 years straight, and then after McKenna and Monica left, it was her, Gabbie, and Kate. And they'd started every game together, and they're just super tight and super, appreciative of one another, because GabbieMarshall, the last 2 years, was a very streaky player. There were extended periods of time where GabbieMarshall was kind of a little tentative to shoot and her shots weren't falling, but they kept encouraging her, Caitlin especially, although KateMartin was definitely the leader. She was the captain for 4 years. Caitlin obviously was kind of the court general, but KateMartin was the vocal leader. But her and Gabbie especially, GabbieMarshall needed some assistance, I feel like, mentally, and she got it, and she came in clutch when needed most. You mentioned the block in the Big Ten championship game, and then also, drawing that moving screen on UConn, and yes, Aaliyah Boston moved. But also, GabbieMarshall, after that happened, she had to delete social media because of harassment that she had gotten from, I guess, just people pissed off about the game. She was, she even, told us in that pregame presser of the national title game, I don't know what she did. The ref was the one that blew the whistle, not her. But, she was very strong in dealing with that as well. And again, she didn't do anything wrong. She followed her man, and Aaliyah Edwards moved into her, and, that was kind of how the cookie crumbled. But overall, she is, a good person. She's from my neck of the woods, Cincinnati. She went to Mount Notre Dame High School. And, now she's off to North Carolina pursuing, she's going to become an orthodontist now. So they're all still tight. She was at the WNBA draft to watch Caitlin get drafted. She was also, I believe, on stage with Caitlin at the end when she and her teammates got to be on stage at SNL at the show. So Caitlin very much cares about all of her Iowa teammates, and I still think that she misses them a lot.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, those bonds make all the difference in the world, especially, high school, college, or whatever the case may be. Bonds are definitely important, and we saw that during their time together in Iowa City with Caitlin and GabbieMarshall. You talked about another person I want to mention is MonicaCzinano. Monica, again, played center during Caitlin's time with the Hawkeyes, and certainly Monica and Caitlin had a pretty good relationship. What was Caitlin's relationship like with Monica during their time together?
I mean, it was a classic big sister, little sister. Monica, it was I call her the proud graduate of the JanJensen School of Post Players. I mean, JanJensen, who's now the head coach, she was a longtime assistant head coach whose sole responsibility, it felt like, was to really coach up the post players. And MonicaCzinano was a classic example of that, where CaitlinClark would just dump it to her in the post. She wouldn't take a dribble. She would just know exactly where she was and where to pivot and just throw it up off the glass and in. And obviously, that might not necessarily translate to the WNBA, which is why, she got drafted in the third round and then promptly cut before her rookie year. But in the college game, when everyone's on Caitlin, for someone to just be able to catch the ball, be aware of where she is, and lay it up, that's invaluable. And she was also big and could be able to, really defend against bigger players, which I think Iowa lacked this year. But in terms of, the relationship, I mean, I feel like the same thing for Czinano can be the same thing for Gabbie, which could be the same thing for Hannah, which is the entire team is super close. And you see that in the way that they recruit and the way they approach the transfer portal. I remember a lot of people were asking, why didn't Iowa hit LSU just won the title and they picked up 2 high-profile transfers. Why isn't Iowa getting dirty in the transfer portal? And a lot of that has to do with culture. LisaBluder, would rather, instead of bringing in a transfer to be, the 7th person, she would rather keep the 12th person to preserve the family culture and the type of positive environment that she wants. And so, and you saw that, and you see the relationships with Caitlin and all of her previous teammates, and you've seen that with KateMartin and all of her previous teammates. MonicaCzinano, you just mentioned, was recently at an Aces game to cheer on Kate. Hawkeyes support Hawkeyes no matter what. It's a huge sorority and fraternity when it comes to athletes at that program. And, Monica was, again, one of the best friends.
Absolutely. And somebody that you mentioned, HannahStuelke. I mean, Hannah, this past April, I mean, she had a run for the ages. I mean, especially in the game against UConn, she really turned up her game. And, of course, in the Elite Eight game against LSU, we really see a star in the making, so to speak, as far as the University of Iowa is concerned, and the program being in good hands for the next several years. Give me your thoughts on Caitlin and her time with Hannah.
I mean, the design is for the torch to be passed to Hannah. When Hannah dropped 47 points, Caitlin was even talking, saying, that, the torch is going to be hers, and she's going to be the future face of it. And you've already kind of started seeing it when they were promoting the early season showcase with, Paige Beckers and UConn, and I believe, Louisville's also in on it, and Hannah-Stuelke's face was the Iowa face. She's the next person. She went to All-Iowa Attack, which is the same AAU team that Caitlin was. She got her offer to Iowa when she was in middle school. She has been highly watched, and is also a local product. She went to Cedar Rapids, Washington, and not a lot of Eastern Iowa natives tend to go to Iowa, or are actually good enough to go to Iowa. But Hannah fits the bit, and Hannah also played out of position this year. She's naturally a power 4. She's a 4. She had to play the 5 this year because of that absence of MonicaCzinano. And in my opinion, I think Iowa was banking on getting this incoming freshman, Audie Crooks. So Audie Crooks plays for Iowa State, and she was a massive force at the school called Bishop Garrigan. And Iowa was in the running to get her. Iowa State was in the running to get her, but ultimately her signature landed with Iowa State. And I think that gap proved pretty pivotal for Iowa in terms of who was in the post, because they threw in other players like Addie O'Grady and, even A.J. Ediger at times, and it wasn't quite the same without Monica. And odds are, they decided to try to go a little smaller and play Hannah at the 5, and that worked. But when you're playing against someone like Camila Cardoso, who's 6'7", and makes a guy like me have to crane my neck upward, that's a pretty tall task, and that's kind of what did the Hawkeyes in the national title game. But I think what you're going to see is her shift to her natural position next year. You're going to see the offense start to go more traditionally through her, because Iowa has done offense through post players before. Megan Gustafson was a Naismith Trophy Player of the Year. She won that in 2019 and is also actually currently on the Aces. But she was a standard center, back you down, rough you up, get to the cup. And Hannah is also really elite at running the court, getting there on fast breaks. And I know we're going to talk to the WNBA. A lot of people are going to be like, Hannah would have caught that, because Hannah runs the floor and the chemistry was there. And we'll see how Iowa does with Hannah. There's also, a high-profile transfer in Lucy Olson, who's going to be filling in that what I think to be is the star guard spot. But I think the chemistry running with HannahStuelke, especially with JanJensen still there and now officially running the show as the head coach, I think there could be some real damage done there.
Yeah, absolutely. The future is definitely bright for Hannah. And like you said, with the new coach, with Jensen coming in, definitely it opens up more opportunities for Hannah to do what she does best. And speaking of doing what she did best, KateMartin, right? KateMartin was the coach on the court, or as affectionately known as the glue of the team during the whole CaitlinClark Iowa era with the other teammates that we mentioned. Kate, definitely instrumental, as you said, the vocal leader of the team. Give me your thoughts on Caitlin and Kate's time together as a member of the Hawkeyes.
I don't think Iowa gets that far without KateMartin, because if you remember, in both of their national title game runs, they had a lot of trouble in the second round, where it was looking pretty dicey to see if they can pull it out. And I think KateMartin's leadership definitely helps. I think CaitlinClark's play obviously helps. But KateMartin is so invaluable in doing the dirty work, rebounding, facilitating the offense, knocking down shots when she's open, creating a shot every now and then. She's the marquee role player, and in a league that is full of stars, and you've seen this with the Aces, the true value is in someone who does that stuff, because there are plenty of people that can drive and get buckets and score, but when you have a bunch of that, you need somebody to just be a team player and accept it and do what it takes to win, and people notice that, and that's what the Aces have noticed. And that's why she just got her first start. Part of that is due to injuries, but she's earned that right. She's earned that right to start. And also, I mentioned how everyone's best friends. I would argue that Kate is Caitlin's bestest friend. I don't know. Caitlin doesn't have best friend rankings, but, they were roommates during road trips. They were super, super close. And you also saw that in the, ESPN Full Court Press doc, that they were, roommates, watching the South Carolina game together, making jokes, having a gazillion water bottles on the end tables together. They were super tight, and when they, eventually reunited, you can tell how happy they were to see each other, and it's going to be really weird. I hope they can be teammates again someday, maybe on a Des Moines expansion team. I don't know. I'll throw that out there.
Oh, wow, you throwing it out in there to the universe, right?
No, there's nothing in the works as of now, but in theory, it would make sense if somebody were to put it together, because the arena is there. Wells Fargo Arena in Des Moines is perfect for summer usage. It's home of the, Iowa Wild, which is the minor affiliate of the NHL, and the Iowa Wolves, which is the G League affiliate of the Minnesota Timberwolves. So perfect venue and perfect, honestly, fan base support, because I mentioned, Iowa being a huge supporter of women's sports and women's basketball especially. So, if somebody were to put a bid together and the money makes sense, I would hope the commissioner would listen.
You know what? That could happen sooner than later. The WNBA, the San Francisco Bay Area, will have a team in 2025 with the Golden State Valkyries, and then Toronto will join the W in 2026. So The league is looking to expand and to grow, so there's a strong possibility there could be another team in the Midwest. You know, Chicago and Indianapolis, they have their teams, and who knows? Hey, you put it out there in the universe, Des Moines could get it, and as you gave us some interesting facts about having an arena to support it, so that could happen sooner rather than later. And you mentioned about the relationships, of course, the coaches, right? LisaBluder and JanJensen. These women were very influential, not just in Caitlin's life and the athletic and the character development, but just the women that we talked about earlier. Just give me your thoughts on Caitlin's relationships with Coach Bluder and Coach Jensen.
I mean, what else can you say? I mean, they were obviously key in her recruitment, and, you know, in terms of at least what I've seen from LisaBluder, if I can just talk about her for a second. Lisa, I don't know if there's anyone that appreciates the growth of the women's game more than LisaBluder, because she was in the thick of it. She was a former player herself, and she started out her coaching at a smaller school in Iowa called Drake. They play in the NBC. And I remember her telling the story about how, you know, you were lucky to get a few hundred at games, and they would travel via, you know, her van and her husband's van. And one time they accidentally left the player at the gas station. They had to drive back for her, and they only had like one pair of shoes designated per player, and you hope you make it last. And now to see everything grow and the national media start to really talk about it and people want to watch, and you know, it's incredible. And JanJensen was the same. You know, she played during the 66 era where, you know, you had three players playing on one side of the court, and then you throw the ball, and then it's three players on the other side of the court going at the hoop. And then it becomes 5v5. And that coaching tree has been almost airtight. Her, JanJensen, and this other coach named Jenny Fitzgerald, who also just retired. Jenny Fitzgerald's more of the guard specialist. And you know, they had coached together at Drake, they had coached together at Iowa, and when LisaBluder retired, you know, they filed for an exception in terms of, like, interview practices because everyone and their mother knew that JanJensen was the heir apparent. She had the qualifications to be a head coach decades ago, and she had the humility to stay and just be with Iowa because not only was she happy there, but she was appreciated there, you know. There was a lot of attention on Lisa as the head coach, but a lot of credit was also given to Jan because Jan was very influential in coaching and Lisa was very influential in coaching. And in terms of Caitlin, their biggest influence, you know, Caitlin was always talented. She could always shoot the lights out. But the biggest improvement that the coaches were able to do was have her be herself while also incorporating the team and also, you know, coaching her up mentally. Because Caitlin will even admit this, when she was younger, you know, she was, I mean, she's still a perfectionist. She hated mistakes. When a teammate wouldn't catch the ball, when she would be bricking a three, when she doesn't get a call, she would be very emotional and very, you know, on edge and very feisty and lose her cool. And over the years, you know, she has really improved in that regard and being a little more patient with the teammates, knowing when to push and when to encourage, knowing, you know, when to keep your head while also, you know, harnessing that competitive fire without letting that fire turn uncontrollable. And so you're seeing that, and it's paying dividends now where everyone's looking at her, everyone wants to get at her, and letting Caitlin be herself without it being the CaitlinClark show is one of the most intricate game plans I think any coach can do, and LisaBluder did it perfectly. And she's also the kindest, most thoughtful person that I've talked to on a coaching staff in quite some time.
Wow, that's awesome to hear those things, not just about Coach Jensen, but also about Coach Bluder, and certainly just from with Coach Bluder and the University of Iowa being out in the media forefront during the last several years, it's wonderful to see Coach Bluder get that praise as well, and then that being transferred over to Coach Jensen. But nice words that you mentioned about Coach Bluder. And lastly, about Caitlin and her impact at the University of Iowa. You talked about the recruits that are going to be coming in the short term, but how will the University of Iowa as a whole benefit from Caitlin's legacy?
Well, I mean, you mentioned short-term, long-term. It's hard to say. It really needs some time to pass, but I think in general, so more people are going to know about Iowa, and more people might apply to Iowa and go to Iowa, and more, athletes might commit to Iowa for multiple sports, and, especially, with Caitlin as an alum who obviously would care, and, her time in Iowa City is not done. I mean, they still have to retire her jersey, and she'll definitely be there for that, and hang up the banner. So she won't be a stranger. She'll probably attend a few games, and the Hawkeye Alumni Network is definitely a legit thing, and there's a lot of people who come back. For example, George Kittle, Iowa alum, he came back to watch the second round game this year of the NCAA tournament that was hosted at Iowa. So it's hard to say what it's going to be, because at this moment we're only seeing a peak, and we don't know if that's a point in exponential growth or a peak that comes into a valley. But if I had to bet, it would be the first option.
All right, fair enough. It definitely she made her mark, and like you said, there's still more to be done in Iowa City. So definitely, Caitlin has an inkling to that city and that community and that university forever. And speaking of what an inkling of what we've seen so far, so Caitlin is in the WNBA. The 2024 WNBA draft breaks records, ratings records never seen before. Caitlin's having a rough go right now in the W. We've seen bits and pieces of the greatness, but she's been met with a lot of opposition. At least in my opinion, she's been met with a whole lot of opposition, and it's been a lot of growing pains that she's going through right now. What are your thoughts on Caitlin in the WNBA so far?
So the one thing that I would mention as a good reference is, when, the Super Bowl champion plays your team, right? Everyone is trying to take them down, and you hear the Chiefs say this a lot where, every team, every Sunday, the other team gives us their best shot. Imagine having every team give you their best shot, but you're on the worst team. That's what it is. Everyone has the fever circled on the schedule. Everyone sees the praise that Caitlin's getting, and they don't want to be another cog in the Caitlin greatness machine. And the more I thought about it, I don't know if there is a more inhospitable situation for a rookie debuting into a professional sport than CaitlinClark has, because of the weight of expectation and the fans that have gone wild and potentially overrating her, saying that she's going to be, MVP year one versus the other people that says, she sucks. And then, a lot of casual media saying this and that. And then it gets to the point where at this point, and especially with the head coach that she currently has, I'm usually not a coach hater, but I can't help but notice, Christy Sides, the way she has managed, runs from the other team to call timeouts, or, lineups, or the lack of set plays that are there. And in terms of, just galvanizing her players, there have been multiple occasions in press conferences where she will throw her players under the bus, saying, they didn't work hard enough. They didn't do this. They didn't do that. And it's okay to criticize, but usually at the end they go, that's on me. Because as a coach, the players are already going through a lot. You need to take some of that hit. And she hasn't. And then also you tie into the fact that just recently she, told the entire media a text message that Caitlin privately sent to her. And especially after this recent 10-point game, now everybody's like, oh, they woke a monster, huh? They woke a monster, huh? She provided material, again, the kinks in the armor, so to speak, for other people to attack her. And especially right after CaitlinClark had a very elaborate response on how she wasn't disappointed and, you know, just wants to use it as motivation. And then, you know, Christy kind of breaks that confidence just to, you know, make a statement. That's not ideal. And also, there's a flat-out fact that, you know, the WNBA players, they don't like her. And you can argue as to why, but they don't. And they don't hate Caitlin the person. It's just that whenever they see her face walking down the court, they see, you know, national media members saying, we only watch because of her, and fans saying she's better than you, and people saying, oh, well, you suck, and this, and that. And they see all that toxicity just looking at her face, and they take it out on her. They mock her. They foul her. They hit her. And there's more eyeballs now, and now they're starting to notice, hey, why aren't the refs calling that? What's going on here? And a lot of people are discovering some of the stuff that's been going on in the WNBA for years. But then you also have people that haven't watched the game at all but are pretending that they have got a doctorate's degree in Women's National Basketball Association, and it's just not an ideal situation for her. And unfortunately, it's not going to stop, and it's starting to get to a political peak because race is starting to be thrown around. Is she only popular because she's white? Let me just stop that right there. No. She drops 30-footers on people and scores triple-doubles and is one of the best at both assisting and scoring. So there's that. But you also have to take into account the one argument for, you know, people a little bitter about Caitlin is that there's a bit of a disproportionate demographic as to players in the league versus the most highly promoted and regarded players. It is a majority black league, and a lot of what people will call the greats that have been marketed over the years have been not black players. You know, the leading scorer of the WNBA, Diana Taurasi, she's white. Sue Bird, the leading assister, she's white. Breanna Stewart, who won 4 national championships in college, won an MVP, multiple, I think, she's white. The previous college all-time leading scorer before CaitlinClark was not black. It was Kelsey Plum, who's Puerto Rican. One of the first people that circulated into the media that got a shoe deal, Sabrina Ionescu, she's white. You know, so the fact that there's another white person tearing it up could be part of the racial tension. But at the end of the day, it's just, you know, envy comes in all shapes and colors. And that's kind of what it is for a lot of players. Like, I've done damage in this league for years. Why is this girl who hasn't stepped on the court yet got all this money and deals and attention and all this? I'm going to show her what's what. And what stinks is that, you know, not only is she the best player on the team and not a lot of other people can do damage, which is, again, another slight to Christy's side because Aaliyah Boston won Rookie of the Year and she has seemingly regressed. But she's getting so much attention now because they don't want to be on the highlight reel. She is going to be guarded so closely. She already has been. She's been face-guarded full court. They've done box-and-one, which for people who don't know, they basically play like a 4-person zone and have just one person follow Caitlin wherever she goes, regardless of where the ball is. She's gotten so much attention and physicality, more than any standard rookie is. I know a lot of people are like, oh, you know, like Angel Reese might be better. Well, Angel Reese doesn't bring the ball up the court. And there's also Camila Cardoso next to her and a bunch of other scorers that can get her the ball, and she gets some easy looks. And I don't know if we're going to be talking about the Angel Reese debate, but I know there's some people saying that Caitlin's only Caitlin because of Angel. To give an accurate time frame of when people knew about Caitlin, it was her sophomore year when she was shooting the lights out against Michigan on the road, if you remember, when she was nailing a bunch of threes. And that was when people were saying, oh, wow, like Caitlin's good. She's, you know, we had, you know, Kelsey Plum, then Sabrina Ionescu. I guess Caitlin's got next. And then her junior year came, and she was dropping 30 burgers, 40 burgers, triple-doubles, and everyone's going, oh, snap, she does this, like, all the time. I gotta watch. And then this is the next part of why there's a lot of debate. I'm going to probably put a good chunk of blame on ESPN for this, because Elite Eight CaitlinClark drops a 41-point triple-double, and she does the "you can't see me" motion to her bench. It has been confirmed by both her teammates and opponents that she was doing it to her bench. ESPN immediately runs with it on their social media platforms and says that she did it to Hailey Van Lith or to the other team. That, in turn, and then also for some reason, when CaitlinClark waved off South Carolina's shooter and they passed the ball, apparently Angel Reese and LSU, they took that as disrespect and you're not going to beat us because of that, which is very weird logic. That's like if you're a Bears fan and you watch the Packers, lose to the Jaguars and you're like, you don't disrespect the NFC North like that. We're going to beat you. What? If that's one of your rivals. You should enjoy seeing them get taken down a peg. And then you get to the national title game, and in the lead-up to it, if you remember, ESPN on Instagram and I think a little bit on Twitter, they were posting these kind of weird culture posts where it was, this is the music that Iowa's locker room is listening to, and it's a Disney movie song or something, and then this is the music that LSU is listening to, and it's, rap, hip-hop, and they really were kind of pushing this, Catholics versus convicts part 2. And then, of course, you get to the game, and that wave happens. In terms of when Angel Reese first became a thing, many people don't know that she started out at Maryland for a couple years. And then she went to LSU, where in her junior season, she was a very productive player, got a lot of double-doubles. She probably would have been 4th in Naismith voting and would have been able to attend the ceremony if she was academically eligible, but she wasn't. And the very first viral moment was during the NCAA tournament. I believe it was against Tennessee when she had a physical, play and then just kind of stared down at the Tennessee player on the floor and kind of said some words. That was when we first kind of heard of Angel Reese. And then, of course, the national title game. And Angel following her and then using the time to celebrate to continue to talk trash about Caitlin and then do the wave at her at the ESPYs. And to this day, she credits herself as the reason Caitlin exists. So I would argue Caitlin existed before Angel, but obviously she continues to exist with Angel. And there may be some racial dynamics there, but a lot of it just comes down to just regular envy. And that definitely plays a factor in a lot of things, and including, the recent news that came out about the Olympics as well.
Yeah, those are a lot of determining factors into that, Curtis. And just a note to pass along, the WNBA set record TV ratings in the month of May. So to say the league that has never made a profit since it's been in existence in 1997, you would think that with someone like CaitlinClark and with the attendance records and ratings records that have been set, you would think it would continue to go upward for not just the WNBA, but women's basketball. Turns out right now it's going in the opposite direction. But you mentioned it, Caitlin left off of this year's Olympic team. I had a lot to say about this, and the floor is yours, sir. Caitlin's left off of this year's Olympic team. She has been named as an alternate, however, but overall, at the moment, left off of this year's Olympic team. Your thoughts?
Well, the first big thing that I noticed was that USA Today sports article that was very confident in the 2 anonymous USA veterans who cited concern over how Clark's millions of fans would react to limiting playing time on a stacked roster being a factor in leaving her off, which is really alarm bells because there's a few ways to put this out. If it's pure merit, 12 best players, okay, but then why isn't Arike Ogunbowale on there? Because Diana Taurasi has eerily similar numbers to CaitlinClark. She's 42 on the decline, and she's on the roster. Now, that's a pretty normal thing, aging veterans who were once all-time greats that, they get that benefit of the doubt just for the sake of, publicity, a known face, a known legend that we are appreciating. And then the other interesting part is another guard that made the team that Caitlin didn't is Chelsea Gray. Chelsea Gray hasn't suited up this year. She's still recovering from an injury. So instead of CaitlinClark and Arika Ogunbowale, who is averaging, nearly 27 points a game, you're having an aging 42-year-old and a person who will be probably not in game shape coming off of an injury. So from a playing standpoint, Caitlin versus Diana could be its own discussion, but Arika should be on the roster. And I think the other part that I think might be disappointing for Fever fans is that if Aaliyah Boston had taken that next step and had gone even further, she could have taken Brittany Griner's spot, because Brittany Griner has been aging and has been in and out of the basketball court for, reasons that we all know now. And she also is recovering from a toe injury. So Fever fans are probably very less than pleased. But in terms of, there was an argument to be made on both sides about, merit. She didn't earn it. But if it was just based on pure, points per game productivity and nothing else matters, Diana Taurasi shouldn't necessarily be on the team. However, being, a lot of people are saying, oh, she has a bunch of experience being at 5 previous Olympics. Well, Asia Wilson and Brianna Stewart, they both have Olympic experience. So that part is taken care of. And it's oh, well, she could be the first to get 6 Olympics. And then at that point, you are arguing a PR stunt. You are arguing a publicity stunt. And then you have to be okay, what is better publicly that could be a good stance for women's basketball? Diana Taurasi making a record-breaking 6th appearance at the Olympics, or CaitlinClark going to the world stage and going on display. And as a sports fan, I admit I'm pretty disappointed that Caitlin's not going. Because if you know anything about Team USA basketball, they whoop everybody. They have won the last 7 gold medals. They haven't lost an Olympic game in 30 years. There will be times where, yes, CaitlinClark will not be she won't be starting, she won't be, the 6th person off the bench, but you're going to be blowing out a nation by 30 points, and you know what would make that last quarter more enjoyable? Seeing CaitlinClark check in the game. And in terms of growing the sport, which is part of what the Olympics is all about, having CaitlinClark on the team is monumentally more valuable than having her off. In addition, I have a feeling that Paris was really hoping that she'd come, because during the NCAA tournament this past year, I'm pretty sure it was either Sweet 16 Elite 8, I think, there was a reporter from France that came and asked her a few questions. And now looking back at it, I'm kind of wondering if they were kind of gathering some intel for if she was coming for the Olympics. And now that's not happening. And if she made it or missed it, it would have been a discussed topic. People would talk about if she had earned it or she had not earned it. But what is for sure now is that millions of viewers will not watch when they probably would have. Now, part of it is probably I only watch for Caitlin and blah, 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 and that's probably a little toxic. But, in terms of just pure intrigue, we got the men's 400 going on over on the track. We have some skeet shooting, and women's basketball's on? Oh yeah, Caitlin's playing. They're up 70 to 54, but oh wait, Caitlin could check it. Just that casual click of the remote, that's all gone. Because there is no hype. There is no, are we going to win? There's no immediate threat. So there's not a big risk of them losing, although I cannot imagine the pandemonium if somehow they lose. So if if Caitlin is not the 12th best player in the world, maybe she's 20th, it might be worth it for the sake of women's basketball to take her. However, I think part of it also is the fact that, you have the star players of the team, like Asia Wilson, Brianna Stewart, Ionescu, Plum, and all they're going to ask about is the 12th person on the bench. They're annoyed. And a lot of them are annoyed. Recently, the New York Liberty had a press conference. They were not playing against Caitlin, but they got a question about Caitlin, and Brianna Stewart rolled her eyes. And no, it's not Caitlin's fault, but she's being talked about. It's Caitlin this, Caitlin that. What's Clark doing? And they deep down probably just want something for themselves. However, having something for themselves is going to have a price, and that price is publicity. So we'll have to wait 4 years. I'm very intrigued on what the narrative will be in 4 years because a lot of things aren't promised. The league is really banking on the new media rights deal negotiations that are going to come in 2026, I believe. And there's more college stars coming out of the pipeline. Paige Beckers is next. Obviously, Juju Watkins is going to be coming. And there's going to be a lot of veterans that are still there. And so making that 12-player roster is going to be another debate in 2028. And where will the league be in 2028? Will the ride fade or will the ride continue? And, there's a lot of... This is the one thing I'm almost ticked off the most. It has become in political issues. There's a lot of, activists saying that if you are a fan of CaitlinClark, then you don't appreciate black people, and then all of a sudden, you have, members of, the GOP starting to tweet about her, and that's what kind of breaks my heart the most, is that if you remember from earlier, CaitlinClark just wants to play. She wants to play at a high level, inspire the next generation. She doesn't want any of this. She's happy that she, is popular and that the game is growing because of that, but she's not a political pawn. And there's a lot of people mad at her for not, calling out her own fans. It's she doesn't need to call out anything. She's CaitlinClark and she just wants to play. And unfortunately, the discussion has gone far from it, and I don't know when it will come back to what's on the court. And she'll have some time to rest, but the attention's still going to be on her. The physicality's still going to be on her. She's going to get shoved. She's going to get mocked. She's going to, get talked to in a probably bad way. The coach is probably going to make a dumb decision. The refs aren't going to call something, and she's going to have probably the biggest maturity and stamina and perseverance that any young athlete has ever been since LeBron James. And we'll see if she can recover and bounce back.
Yeah, that's definitely a lot that you've said on this topic, Curtis, and certainly you mentioned about Arike Ogunbowale, who is definitely deserving of a spot on that team. Also, a couple of others I want to mention as well. De'Erica Hamby, who has had a solid first half of the year for the Los Angeles Sparks. Also, Skylar Diggins-Smith. Those are a couple of others that definitely deserve strong consideration to be on that team. And certainly, I think this moment could have been a Michael Jordan 1992 Dream Team moment where not only the WNBA but women's basketball could have catapulted to a global level, but certainly, definitely, like you mentioned about the media rights deal for the WNBA is going to be up in 2 years, so definitely, that could have been the catalyst to possibly make the game global and would have opened up opportunities, not just for Caitlin, but for all parties involved in the W. But this is a lot of fun, Curtis, and again, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be on the program. Tell everybody where they can find you on social media and any websites. Let the listeners know that as well.
Yeah, so the big thing is my Twitter at CurtisFeder _ CurtisFeder _ and also just keep an eye out for the Iowa's News Now Sports YouTube page. That's where I tend to post a lot of cool highlights and stories. And yeah, can't wait to tackle some more sports coverage. We actually have a special discussing CaitlinClark's transition to the NBA called Caitlin Fever. So feel free to keep your eyes peeled for that. We'll have the full episode on YouTube. So yeah, there you go.
You heard it from him. He is CurtisFeder. He's a sports anchor for KGAN-TV and KFXA-TV, the CBS and FOX affiliates in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Curtis, again, thank you so much. And if ever you want to come back on, just feel free to let us know.
All right. Appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me once again.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning into the channel. Remember to click like, share, and subscribe. And thank you for watching.